What's going on, everybody? Justin here with Everything Aquarium, back with another aquarium video. Hope you guys are doing great. Hope you're having a great day and doing fish tank things. Anyways, today's video is going to be a little bit different. As you can see, I'm currently screen recording on my computer, and it's going to be more of a technical video. We're going to break down some things. Definitely going to be a longer video, so sit back and relax if you'd like. You definitely don't have to stick around if you don't want to, if you're not into all that technical stuff. But anyways, we're going to break down all the plants in my aquariums. I currently have 14 different types of plants, and we're going to get into each one and break it down a little bit, talk about its needs and what it's going to do for you, what it's going to look like, just things like that. We're not going to get too much into it, of course. We don't want to spend too much time on each plant, but we're going to spend just enough time to get our feet wet so we know what we're doing with them. And we know how to handle these plants if you're interested in purchasing one or just interested in general. So let's start by going over to Busey Plant, which is where I get a lot of plants. I also get some from Aquarium Co-op, but they don't have all the plants I currently have, so we're going to go with this. To make things easy, I'm just going to go into the wish list, and we're going to get into the info of each plant and go from there. So let's start this way. We're going to start with going from, we're going to start with the 6.8 gallon cube. A couple of these things have the same type of plants, so we're going to start with the 6.8 gallon cube. Then we'll move over to the shrimp tank or whatever. And this just has hornwort in it, so nothing too crazy. Just wanted to show you the tank itself. So we'll start with the background plants and kind of move our way forward and stuff like that. So we'll start with these three bunches right here, because those are the newest plants I have. And we'll go on from there. So back to Busey Plant, we're going to go over to this. This is the Limnophilia aromatica. We'll kind of go through the description a little bit. It's a perennial plant that can display a wide variety of colors ranging from green, red to pink. Thin pointy leaves grow in opposite pairs along the whole length of the stem. So it's good for a background plant or a mid-ground bushy plant, especially if you use CO2. Comes from East Asia, ranges from 8 to 20 inches in height, which is definitely a good size for a background plant, or mid-ground if you routinely prune it. 6.5 to 7.5 pH, which is good. It's relatively easy to care for. I found that myself. I've only had it for about a week and a half, so we'll find out in the long run. Moderate to high light. I'm currently using moderate light just because I have an algae problem, as you can see on the driftwood here. You could see some, it almost looks like blackbeard, but it's actually staghorn algae. Very small bits of staghorn algae, and you can sort of see it on the inside of the glass there, and then a little bit of green algae, which is common. So if I was to run highlight, I would turn this other light on, and that would give me my highlight. But right now I'm just running the medium/high full spectrum Hydra light. I did a review on that, so if you want to check that out, look on my page and you'll find that video there. So yeah, using moderate light, CO2 is required just because it really wants to grow, right? It wants that carbon, it wants to suck up that carbon and be able to take off straight up. And that's what it's going to do if you have CO2. I guess I wouldn't say it's 100% required, but I do have CO2. It's helping make it look nice. That picture's a little bit older when I first set it up, but now it's standing straight up. So yeah, propagation, you just cut it. You plant the piece you cut. Grows at a medium rate. Yeah, and it says right here, propagation being achieved by taking cuttings from the main stem of the plant, that are replanted into the substrate. So that's the way you do that. So let's move on to the next one. I know we probably spent a little bit too much time on there. We're going to move over to, let's go over to the Ammonius senegalanius. Excuse me if I butchered that, but not the best with these names yet. Right here is this guy, looking nice and red when I got it in, and now it's even more red. And I'll probably try to get an updated picture here soon, but I got a bunch of hornwort in there. to try to suck up the nutrients, get rid of the algae. But let's talk about this one. So this one's kind of an exclusive for me, kind of doing a little bit of experimenting with it because, as you can see right here, it's a new plant to the hobby whose red leaves make a captivating four-arm ground contrast to green foliage. This plant comes from Western and Central Africa, grows 3 to 5 inches, 6.5 to 7.5 pH. It's a difficult care level because it is a new plant. It's moderate to high light. CO2 is recommended. Propagation by cutting it and replanting it, just like the last plant. And the grow rate is a medium rate of growth. We'll get into more to this plant sometime in the future. I want to do kind of a showcase on it once I learn a little bit more about it, because like I said, it is relatively new to the hobby. Not many people are having currently care for this plant. It grows wavy-edged oval leaves, alternating up its stem. The leaves are brightly colored and can display a range of color patterns, usually with dark brick red being the predominant hue. Green, orange, yellow are also tend to feature this plant's colorations. CO2 is definitely going to improve the coloration on any plant, in my opinion. Actually, that's just really a proven fact. So if you want to really bring out the color of this plant, definitely check out CO2. I wouldn't recommend this plant for a beginner because it's definitely going to want that high highlight, that medium to highlight. It's definitely going to want some CO2. It's definitely feasible without that stuff, but you got to at least have some fertilizer. You can't put this in a one of those tanks you see on here on YouTube. You can't put it on in one of those no fertilizer, no water change plants like that, or tanks like that. It's just not going to do well. This tank definitely, or this plant, I keep saying tank, excuse me. This plant definitely needs that good lighting. CO2 is highly recommended. Nutrient-rich soil is definitely one of the things you're going to want, and general fertilizer, of course, which I have all of those. So hopefully it'll do well for me. Let's move on to the next plant here. We're going to go over to the Rotala Macandra Mini, I think it is, if I remember. Yeah, Rotala Macandra Mini. Everybody's heard of Rotala. There's not much to talk about here. It's just really red. Of course, with the use of CO2, it'll bring out that color even more to the usual green foliage, which is what most Rotala is. It can be difficult to grow since it requires very high levels of light and nutrients. Without sufficient lighting, the plant's leaves will shrivel and fall off. In its submerged state, leaves will grow prostrate and have a green color. The submerged version will grow upright and have a deep red color, given the proper growing conditions. Rotala Macandra grows quickly. So this comes from India. It'll grow 8 to 11 inches or feet. I could be saying this wrong. I don't know. That might be, well, obviously not feet, but 8 to 11 inches. I don't know what I'm talking about. 5 to 7.5 pH. So pretty open on that parameter. It's difficult to take care of, like I said, because you need that really high nutrients, very high levels of nutrients and light. CO2 is required to get that high red, or excuse me, that bright, nice, dark red color. You're going to need CO2. Trim side shoot and plant in a substrate is the way you propagate it, so it'll shoot out. It'll literally send out a shoot, and you can cut that and then plant it into the substrate. It'll grow at a fast rate, which it is. Once I get rid of this algae, it'll especially be growing better. That way, no nutrients are being sucked away from it. So right now, it's not doing the best, but it definitely is one stop away from thriving. Once I get rid of that algae, it will. But yeah, beautiful plant. Let's go check it out in my tank again real quick when I first got it. Now, this is the same day I opened the package, so like I said, everything's not looking the best. I wish I had gotten an updated picture before I put the hornwort in there, but unfortunately I didn't. So yeah, Rotala Macandra Mini. That's the 3 newest additions besides this hairgrass, which I'll get to later in the video. Let's move on to this Pogostemon stellaris octopus, or however you say that, because of course we know I'm not good at saying that, or any technical word, scientific name. They're selling this for $5.99. Yeah, be sure to check out Boost Plant, by the way, guys. I'm not sponsored or anything, but they just have always a big selection and great things like that. So, like this right now, you can get 4 lead bunches for $12.99, and they give you one for free. So, buy 3 get 1 free. It's $5.99 a bunch right now. That's really a good deal. $12.99 for that. I might even get some myself here soon. Definitely a good deal. Plants pretty easy for me. It'll grow 10 to 20 inches, which is pretty high. 6.5 to 7.5 pH. It's easy to care for, obviously. Moderate to high light. Most of your stem plants are going to be moderate to high light. CO2 isn't necessary. Obviously, I'm running CO2. Propagation, you cut it, replant it. Growth rate, medium. High iron, it'll bring out more of the red tones. It's a perennial plant that can display a wide variety of different colors ranging from green to red to pink. Of course, more CO2. Not the more CO2, but if you add CO2, it's going to bring out more of those colors. Comes from Asia. I don't know if I mentioned that. But yeah, that's pretty much it with that guy. I'll show you another picture here. Definitely got some nice coloration on this one. The more the better balanced your tank is with nutrients and CO2 and all that, the better it's going to look for you. Next, we'll move into. Let's move into the crypt. Let's move into the crypt Wendigo green. And then from the crypt Wendigo green, we'll go over to the crypt lucerans, and we'll take a look at both of those now since those are both crypts. I'm gonna go up to here and the crypt Wendigo green. Everybody knows cryptocorin. You may not know the Wendigo green, but we're going to talk about that right now. This plant likes to be planted and not moved. So if you can plant it, try to plant it in a permanent spot. Try not to move it after. It just works out best that way. Don't make drastic changes, which really goes with anything, obviously. CO2 injection and quality aquarium soil will yield better growth. That's obvious in most cases. It doesn't say where this comes from, and I'm not sure, to be honest with you. We're going to assume probably South America, Africa. Leaves grow 2 to 3 inches. This isn't a stem plant, obviously. So we're going to talk a lot about leaves. pH is 6 to 7.5. Care is easy, low to medium light because it's not very fast growing. CO2 is not necessary but recommended because that'll definitely help improve coloring and growth rate, of course, and just overall health. If your plant's looking good and it's growing good, you know it's healthy. Propagate it, you cut the rhizome and then replant. The growth rate is slow, obviously, I've said that. It's green and common popular plant, perfect for beginners. Like other crypts, it grows at a moderate rate and can be grown both submerged and immersed, which means you can grow out of water. To propagate, simply cut off new growth plantlets growing from the mother rhizome and then replant, obviously. That's really it with that. You will yield better growth with CO2 and all of that, of course. Use a good quality fertilizer, good quality aquarium soil. It's good substrate like the fluval stratum or Seachem fluorite or 80A aqua soil, lots of other things like that. UNS makes a good aquarium substrate. You can look into all that as well on Boost Plant. So let's move on to the next plant. We're going to go over to the lucerans, I said. Lucerans, whatever way you say that. It's another crypt, so it's going to have relatively the same principles as that Wendigo green. Prefers not to be moved, so don't move them if you can. Sri Lanka, so Asia. 5 to 10 inches, which is actually a decent size. These grow pretty moderate to fast. 6.5 to 7.5 pH. Easy to care for, low to medium light. I would definitely recommend the medium light aspect just to get it going faster if you want it to, I guess. I should say that depends on your wants. If you want to trim it and put in another plant quickly, definitely go toward that medium light. CO2, again, if you want it to grow faster, go toward that CO2 route. Propagation, cut the stem and replant. Pretty simple there. Can grow emerged or submerged as well. Propagate by splitting the rhizome or cutting off new growth and planting. So you can actually split the rhizome So if you want to get it, so if you get a new plant in, you can split the rhizome right by itself, or you can cut off the new growth, and that'll propagate that way. Um, let's move over to, where do we want to go? Let's go over to the Windalove Fern, and then we'll go to the Dwarf Chainsword, and then we'll check out the grass here. Yeah, so let's start with that Windalove Fern. If I can find it on here. There we go. Java Fern, Windalove, or Windalove Fern, otherwise known, Java Fern, Windalove. Microsorpium pedorupus. Not even going to try to pronounce all that properly, but sound it out and you'll be able to figure it out. It's a popular variant of the Java fern created by Tropica. They can grow in low light conditions in a wide range of water parameters. The end of the leaf split into 3 thin leaves, which gives it a beautiful bushy effect when grown out. Yeah, that'll definitely grow out and make a good bushy effect for a good. You can use it as a foreground plant or a mid-ground plant would be my suggestion. If it's really small, definitely a good foreground plant would be good. 3 to 5 inches, 6 to 7.5 pH, which is relatively open. Easy to care for. Low light's nice. CO2 is not required, of course, if you want it to grow faster and look better. Increase the light up a little bit, not too much to where you get algae, and of course add CO2. If you're going to increase the light, I would definitely recommend adding CO2. That way those nutrients can be sucked up by the plants before algae decides to bloom. Propagation separated by the rhizome, slow to moderate growth depending on if you're using nutrient-rich substrate, all that stuff. CO2, high or medium light. The higher you go, I guess I should say, the faster it's going to grow, basically. But you gotta balance everything out so you don't get an algae bloom or basically gas the fish if you got more than suggested amount of CO2, depending if you even have fish. So definitely do your own research on a lot of this stuff too, guys, because I'm not going to go over everything in this video. But just make sure you're safe with all your stuff. You don't want to destroy a tank. We're going to go into the Dwarf Chainsword, which is right there, and then, like I said, the grass. Let's go over to the Dwarf Chainsword. Just took a little break there for a second, guys. Let's check out that Dwarf Chainsword. Back to Pusey plants, of course. Dwarf Chainsword right here. Not going to try to say that name, honestly. Just too much for me to sound out. Dwarf Chainsword, Pygmy Chainsword. It's a carpeting light grass plant. This plant does carpet, yes. I have some carpeting going on right now, actually. It's a carpeting grass-like plant that bears close resemblance to a mix between dwarf hairgrass and microswords. This plant grows by sending out lateral runners just like hairgrass and other sword, and when grown under proper conditions can spread across the foreground of your aquarium. For smaller nano tanks, this plant can also serve as a short background plant, but adequate lighting and CO2 are recommended. Please be sure to remove this plant from its pot. That's just stuff that Pusey plant does. Don't make drastic changes. Obviously, it'll cause melting and rotting with most of any aquarium plant that you have. So when you put it in your tank, let it stuff be, do small water changes, stuff like that. CO2 injection and quality aquarium soil will yield better growth. Again, that goes with lots of things. This actually comes from North America. It'll reach 2 to 3 inches, so it stays relatively short, which of course, like they said, could be good for a background plant, like if you wanted to do a background carpet or a full tank carpet, especially in a nano tank. In a bigger tank, somewhere when you're getting up toward like a 20 gallon and whatnot, all the way up to however big you want to go, it's definitely going to serve better as a mid-ground to foreground plant. It likes a 6.5 to 7.5 pH. It's easy to moderate to care for. Light, medium to high. Definitely like to go toward the higher end on this plant, just because I am running CO2, and that's how you get the best carpeting effect and the healthiest plants. Propagation, cut stem and replant. So you can cut the runner and replant it, move it to wherever you want to, or you can just cut a stem right off and should be able to replant it. It should work as that way, or you can split it. There's lots of different ways we can look at that specifically when I do a plant showcase here soon. So that's enough with that. It grows medium to fast depending on if we're using CO2 and that aquarium soil, quality aquarium soil. Like I said, fluval stratum, or not fluval stratum, Seachem fluorite. Yeah, stratum will work well, obviously too. Root tabs and all that stuff with just regular aquarium substrate will work as well. I don't know if I'm giving you guys the best look at pictures here, but let's try to do better at that. Let me know if I'm not showing you enough pictures. So that's that with that. We did all that. We did the Lucerans. We did the Crypt 180 green. We did the swords, all that. Let's check out this grass. I'm kind of saving this for the end because this is something not too many people have seen as well. You think you have when you look at it, but when we get into it, it's not exactly as it seems. First off, this is a tissue culture. It's Elocaris bellium aquatic farmer tissue culture. So it's Elocaris bellium is the name of the plant. The common name is dwarf hairgrass, but this Elocaris bellium is a classic and extremely popular aquarium plant, commonly used as a foreground choice plant. This particular species, so it is exactly as it seems, basically, I guess I should say. It's a dwarf hairgrass, but it has a different gene or a different trait. So the particular species of hairgrass grows very short and stays relatively low with help from consistent trimming. Elocaris bellium is loved within the community and his ability to produce grass-like carpets in relatively easygoing nature. Blah blah blah. You know about dwarf hairgrass. Let's see. Yeah, so this is dwarf hairgrass. This is exactly what it is. Hairgrass is what you would normally see. Grows 2 to 3 inches in height, 6 to 7.5 pH. It's easy to care for, medium to high light. CO2 is recommended, especially to get that really good carpeting effect. Cut new growth along with roots. You can split it, you can cut the runners in half and take the piece out coming from the mother plant. Replant it wherever you want, or just let it go and it'll grow into a nice carpet. Really, eventually it'll grow into a carpet regardless, just as long as you're adding some type of fertilizer and have a decent light. I'm definitely going to preach toward a higher light on this, and definitely CO2 for sure, if you want to get that full, healthy, nice, lush, bushy plant with a good carpeting effect and great, deep, nice color to it. Yeah, so definitely go with CO2 and lean toward the higher light if you are able to. So that's pretty much it on this tank. I do not. I think everything that's in this tank is all I have for this tank. None of these other plants are in any other tank. Soon it's going to be some of that dwarf's chainsword, because as you can see, it's actually shooting out runners. This is actually part of it right here. It shot all the way to the front of the tank, so it wrapped around, and there's a plant growing there, and then there's actually one behind that Wendella fern. So yeah, that's definitely growing good. Right here, if you notice this is just some Vallisneria, which I'll talk about that here in a minute. Just kind of put it in there to test it out with this CO2 and see how it's going to do. So doing relatively good so far in there. Let's move over to what I currently have in the shrimp tank. Obviously, you see the Vallisneria, the hornwort, which we talked about that in my last video. If you haven't seen that, go check it out when you can. Here's some Amazon sword, which was originally in that 6.8 gallon cube, and I moved it over here recently. And whatever I'm doing in this tank is sure as heck killing the algae off. Because if you could see on here, I don't know if I can zoom in. If you can see on there, it's turning white and pink, which means it's dying. And this is actually some of that dwarf hairgrass as well. I got it floating for now just to get the roots looking a little bit better. That's a good rule of thumb too. If plants got not so good looking roots, for a fact, I know this Vallisneria works well like this. You can let it float toward light, and it'll absorb a lot of light, get a lot of nutrients depending on if it's a column feeder like this hornwort, or if it's a root feeder like the Vallisneria. It'll absorb nutrients better, get more light, and grow those roots out and be able to be planted and stay rooted nice. We actually have some Java fern narrowleaf in here as well. You can see there's some here, and there's a clump here, and then a little one there. That's not doing the best. I think I'm going to unbury the rhizome. It's kind of hit or miss with that in general with me. That's kind of hit or miss. Depending. Well, I got root tabs as well, so it helps. But they tell you not to bury the rhizome. But with this, I've had decent luck. But I think I'm going to unbury it and try to attach it to some driftwood. But that's for another video as well. Let's get into the Vallisneria, of course, and take a look at our wish list back here. So here's the Vallisneria. They also have a good deal on this right now too. $14.99. I don't even know if it's a deal. It's just a good price. $14.99. You get 3 and 1 for free. Buy 3, get 1 for free. $14.99. Vallisneria. It's a heavy root feeder and should be planted deeply in quality aquarium soil, right? So obviously you see it's doing good in my tank, so it can do good in yours too, just as long as you got a good light and you got a good fertilizer, and definitely root tabs I would recommend as well. Aquarium co-op root tabs are great. Grows very large and tall, making it suitable for large planted aquariums. Like I said, a heavy root feeder and should be planted deeply in a quality aquarium soil. This is also considered to be called straight vals. Straight vertical leaves, they act as a perfect background plant. Comes from Central South America. It can grow 8 to 12 inches in height. I've seen it get higher than 12 inches before in lots of different situations. 6 to 7.5 pH. Care is moderate just because it's a heavy root feeder, so they want you to have that good aquarium soil and root tabs and whatnot. Light is moderate to high. CO2 is recommended just to get it to grow nice and quick and a nice lush green color. Shoots out lateral shoots. That's how it'll propagate itself. And you can see that if I go back here into this. You can see it actually, this is a shoot right there. That's a really nice thick one. And it comes up to this plant right here, and you can see it's very nice. This is one of my original plants actually that I got. I started with two plants, and now I have all these. Here's another shoot growing into another plant. Here's a fresh little plant there. More shoots, and once the child plant, like this one, this mother plant shot out a root, grew the child plant. Once the child plant gets a good set of roots, you can cut that shoot right in half, or however you'd like. I usually just cut it in half and let the shoot die off and fish feed on it, and it'll grow nice and long and straight and lush like these. Just as long as it's got a good set of roots, of course. If not, you can float it, and it should grow its roots out nicely. Let's talk about hornwort. Like I said, I made a video about that, so you probably already know a lot about it. But let's break down what Busei plant has to say about it. Ceratophyllum demersum. Probably butchered that one too. It's an extremely easy aquatic plant that can be commonly found floating in lakes and ponds throughout the world. It's often referred to as coontail plant due to its growth characteristics resembling that of a raccoon's tail. It's a column feeder, which we talked about a second ago, so it's going to absorb all the nutrients from the water column. Good for shrimp, good for fry tanks. They can hide in it. It helps to improve water quality. Of course, that's my number one plant when it comes to improving water quality. It's like a whole nother filter. How could you not want to? Especially for the price. It's $5.50 or $16.50, and you get one free for if you buy 3. Buy 3, get 1 free. 4 portions for $16.50. Which is great. 5 stems in 1, which is already a decent amount. You're going to get something like that. and just throw it in there, let it float. You can bury it if you want. I find that you have a lot better results when you let it float. It's just going to take off. Just as long as you got good light and you have a good fertilizer. CO2, really, you don't even need it with this. To be honest with you, it's going to grow just fine. It's going to grow lusher and greener and faster if you do have CO2. But in my opinion, I've had great luck without CO2. Let's see. Propagation, cut along the stem, so you can literally just grab one side, grab the other side, and rip it right in half, and it'll grow just fine. Definitely grows fast, in my opinion. As you've seen, I've shown you videos multiple times on growth of this stuff, and you can just look at the videos and see the growth from day to day just by watching videos. Let's move on to something else now. So right now we're on a shrimp tank. Let's move on to that narrow leaf Java fern. Java fern narrow, as they call it on here. Microsorium Pepperis Java fern narrows. Or did I do that one already? I think I might have did that one already, didn't I? I'm starting to lose my mind here. Okay, anyways, let's skip that one, obviously. I think I did that. What did we do here? Yeah, we did a Java fern. I don't know why I'm trying to go back to that. Let's do the Amazon sword. That's the only one we haven't done. Amazon sword, everybody's heard of it. It's very common in the aquarium hobby, being that they're beautiful and easy to care for, excellent and attract coverage to the background of the aquascape. It's a very hardy species. They require nutrient-dense soil to thrive, and they're heavy root feeders, just like Valsinaria. So they want to be very deep. They want to shoot their roots out as far as they can possibly go, and just suck up everything out of that soil. So this is also good for removing nitrates and whatnot, especially if you got uneaten fish food in the bottom of the tank. Set into the soil. This will just eat that up, and it'll appreciate that. I'm not by any means recommending that you overfeed, but it's not going to destroy your tank if you have a couple of these in there. South America, 4 to 20 inches, which grows extremely high. 6.5 to 7.5 pH. It's easy to care for, light to moderate. CO2 isn't necessary. Again, like with everything, if you want better growth, lusher growth, better looking plants, turn the light up a little bit and add some CO2. The way this propagates is different, and I'm not exactly sure how it propagates. I haven't done too much research on it, but it propagates by the adventitious shoots, I guess. Adventitious. So it shoots out like plants, sort of like Valsinaria. Anyways, I don't want to tell you wrong information, so look that one up for yourself, just if you want to get all the information. Growth rate is fast, actually, surprisingly. And it'll be even faster if you add CO2 and higher light. Amazon sword, obviously you get that from its sword-like shaped leaves. About we're ready to wrap things up here. We don't have much more, but that's pretty much everything with that tank, hornwort, and then where is that? I have Anubias nana in here somewhere too. That'll be our last plant we go over. You can't see it floating around here, but it was currently floating around in a 75-gallon tank. But it's around here somewhere. Let's go back to check out our last plant here. Anubias nana. Lots of different varieties of Anubias. Anubias is a rhizome plant, meaning you don't want to bury it. They're strong plants that can thrive in a variety of environments. They're epiphytes, can be planted and moved about the substrate or attached to hardscape. Epiphytes, however you say it, means they can be planted above the substrate, basically meaning don't plant the rhizome, or it can be planted attached to things, basically meaning the roots are exposed. Obviously, it's attached to something that's not in the substrate, and it can feed off the column like that. Burying the rhizome with all rhizome plants will cause it to melt and die. Don't make drastic changes, all that stuff. Obviously. Comes from West Africa. It grows 3 to 5 inches, 6 to 7.5 pH. It's easy to care for. Low light is fine. CO2 is not necessary. Separate by rhizome, so you split the rhizome when you get a good, decent, healthy plant. Obviously, you don't ever want to try to propagate something when it's not healthy because it just won't. It probably won't end up well. Want to have a. It's like trying to ask a guy to donate a kidney when he already has cancer. You know what I mean? You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you get a good kidney from a healthy guy, if that makes sense, obviously. Um, so yeah, make sure your plants are healthy before you try to propagate. By cutting at least, they'll propagate when they're ready to propagate and when they're healthy on their own. Grow slow to moderate, of course. Like I said, up your light a little bit and add a little bit of CO2, and it'll do even better. That's pretty much with all that. All that being said, I think that's everything I have. That's all we have. Total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 plants. And by far, right now, I'm really getting into this Armenia senegalensis, however you say it. Senegalensis. Um, excuse me for butchering these words. I've never really even said them before I started making videos about them. So this is a really cool plant because it's new to the hobby. Not many people have dealt with it. Like it says right there, new to the hobby, blah, blah, blah. Lots of different colors of this plant right now. On mine, it's, obviously you can see it's nice dark green, red. It's got really thick stems as well, which you don't see too often. It's got really nice thick stems, so it can hold its own weight in the substrate pretty well. Let's take a look at mine. Mine are mostly red to that yellowish orange color, kind of brown right now because I did have a little bit of melting when I first put it in there. But the CO2 is really bringing out those reds, as well as, like I said, that Rotala and that Aromatica are doing well now. I'm going to update a picture and post it on my Instagram, so go check that out at everything_aquarium to get more recent updates. But let me go back to it, actually. Talk about one more thing here. So Rotala mini is what it is specifically says. As you can see, it turns that nice pink right up there, then you'll get that deeper dark red, then you can get yellow, all in one leaf. And it's really something that stood out to me, is all those different colors just in such a small area. It's a really beautiful plant, especially when you get in bunches like this and it starts to propagate, or it starts to grow tall. You can propagate it. Not a bad price, $6.99 for a lead bunch. Not very bad at all. Let's talk about one more plant here. I want to talk about that other one, the Aromatica. Yeah, that's a good price too. Buy 3 get 1 free for $17.99. I'll leave a link for Bousse plant down below. Lots of other stuff on here. They got all these different plants, probably 100 different plants. Bunch of dry goods. They sell tanks, filters, lights, apparel, fertilizers, foods, all type of stuff. Hardscape. Here's that that soil I was talking about. That's contra soil, which is basically a nutrient-rich substrate, basically. This plant, let's talk about it a little bit more. This is one that's kind of a little bit more less common. It's a perennial plant, like I said. That red and pink. Let's get into it. So now this almost gives you a purple look. I really like that, and that's what stood out to me as well. It's a nice purple look, and there's not too many stem plants that have this almost like saw blade edge on the leaves, or crinkle edge, ruffled edge, as you could call it. And you get a lot of color out of it, out of just one leaf as well, which really stands out to me in the aquarium hobby. Is a lot of color, especially when it's gonna contrast those greens and really bring out that natural beauty of the tank just with a couple different colors overall. But if you look in depth in each plant, you're gonna have a lot of different colors per each plant, of course, depending on if you have CO2, nutrient-rich substrate, and all that stuff. One last thing I want to check out is I want to show you one plant that I plan on getting here soon. Parrot's feather. This is a really cool looking plant. I wanted to kind of just show you guys real quick. As you can see, it's got a feathery type leaf to it. It's a stem plant. So with all stem plants, it's going to grow relatively quick. It's actually prohibited in Washington, so if you're in Washington, I'm sorry. Buy 3 get 1 free, $14.99. So a good price on that. Suitable. So what stood out to me here is this can grow with emergent growth sections, meaning that you can have some growing in the water and then have it shoot out of the water as well. Comes from South America, 4 to 16 inches, good size, 6 to 7.5 pH. Care level is moderate, just because you're going to want to have some CO2 and that higher light, and you're going to definitely want that nutrient-rich substrate. Moderate to high light, CO2 recommended. Cut stem and replant. So obviously, when you trim things, you can replant them for most of the time with stem plants. So always a good idea to do that. You can always keep a constant supply of those plants in case any happen to die, God forbid. You can sell them, you can gift them, all types of stuff. So don't just throw them away because it's kind of a waste. If you got the space, replant them. Grows fast. This plant is grown immersed and can be used as a terrestrial or bog plant for ponds. So like I said, it can grow half in the water, half out of the water. Fully submerged, but it does better growing emerged, honestly. I've heard lots of stories about it growing emerged. It looks great. And it'll look like this. So that's really it with this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you got all the technical stuff you could want to get, the nerdy stuff of everything. All these plants are going to do well in a tank pretty much regardless of what you're doing, just as long as you got a good substrate if it's going to be planted, or just good fertilizer, especially if it's a floating plant or a column feeder like the hornwort. And if you're not going to have a nutrient-rich substrate, especially with something like Vallisneria or Amazon sword, you're going to want to add root tabs, at least add root tabs. Or it's just not going to thrive, and you want plants to thrive. That's why we pay for them. That's why we take care of them. That's why we do our water changes. That's why we do what we do, is because we want our tank to thrive, right? And in order to achieve that, you're going to want to do as much as you can do without going overboard. I tend to go overboard, which is fine. If you can afford it, you can afford it. That's what really limits things when you get into it, is if you just don't want to is one thing, but if you can't afford it, it's another thing. So just be responsible. Don't waste your money on plants if you can't take care of them. But definitely go out and try your best at it. With that being said, that's really it for this video, guys. Like I said, I hope you learned something. If you did, feel free to subscribe. If you didn't, feel free to give the video a thumbs down. This is kind of a newer thing I'm going to get into, plant showcase and stuff like this. So I hope you guys can appreciate that. If not, like I said, tell me. Let me know in the comments if you don't like videos like this, and if you want to just see regular videos like I normally do. If you do like it, let me know as well. So yeah, feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you learned something. That's it for now, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.